Father in heaven, thank you for this Sabbath. You watch over everything. You read our hearts as open books. You understand the deep intents of our souls. Lord, we are sinful. We have bitterness rises in our hearts. We can feel disappointments. And sometimes we may be tempted to sin. I pray, Father, that you may forgive us where we have gone wrong before you. And I pray that you may use me, give me the words which I ought to speak. May you enlighten everyone who's online. Let your encouragement be in my heart and in the heart of everyone who's online. May you agitate our minds for the importance of these words. Give me your spirit, Lord, and speak to me and to us. In Jesus' name, amen. Alright, so our topic, we want to address the matter of the Ten Commandments in the schools and trying to reflect what does this mean in the spiritual implication. How does this connect with our salvation, the citadel of life? I believe some of you have come across or have heard about this matter of the Ten Commandments, but sometimes we may just pass over it when we don't understand the depth that is in the matter. And I would like us to investigate certain things. When we go to the Bible, according to Revelation chapter 3, the Laodicean problem, in there we are addressed that Laodicea is blind. In chapter 3 of Revelation, I think that is in verse 17, this is where the deception is, where we think we are rich and in need of nothing, but we are told, because thou sayest, I am rich and increased with goods, and knowest not that thou art wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. So one of the problems is being blind. Lord, I pray that you may clarify my mind and speak to us. Forgive us, Lord, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so one of the problems that we have as Laodicea is that we don't know our condition, and one of our conditions is blindness. I would like to take you to an object lesson that God gave us in the book of Ezekiel. Go with me to Ezekiel chapter 12, and we read there. God told Ezekiel to do certain things, and in doing them, they should be an example to the children of Israel, in that he was representing them. Ezekiel 12 verse 1 says, The word of the Lord also came unto me, saying, Son of man, thou dwellest in the midst of a rebellious house, which have eyes to see and see not. So this is a condition of us having eyes, but we don't see. How do we call that? It is called blindness. It's the one of the realities of a Laodicean. And these people have eyes, but they don't see, and they have ears to hear, and hear not, for they are a rebellious house. Verse 3. Therefore, thou son of man, prepare thee staff for removing, and remove by day in their sight, and thou shalt remove from thy place to another place in their sight. It may be they will consider, though they be a rebellious house. Verse 4. Then shalt thou bring forth thy staff by day in their sight, as staff for removing, and thou shalt go forth at even in their sight, as they that go forth into captivity. Now notice here, Ezekiel is being told by God that get your staff, but this staff should be like staff of moving into captivity. And he says that God is telling Ezekiel to move in the evening time. And notice this in verse 5. It says that, dig thou through the wall in their sight and carry out thereby. He is told another thing. One, he is told to get his staff as one who is being taken into captivity. And he's being told, move in the evening. And we know the evening is something to do with the dark time, when darkness is starting, and then we have the night, and then the midnight. Another thing here is that he's being told to make a hole through the wall. We are going to understand what would this mean. In their sight shalt thou bear it upon thy shoulders, and carry it forth in the twilight. Thou shalt cover thy face, that thou see not the ground, for I have set thee for a sign unto the house of Israel. Another aspect here is that he was to cover his eyes such that he was not able to see where he is going. What does that again imply? It implies as well blindness. In verse 7, it says that, and I did so as I was commanded. I brought forth my staff by day as staff for captivity, and in the even I digged through the wall with mine hand. I brought it forth in the twilight, and I bare it upon my shoulder in their sight. Verse 8. And in the morning came the word of the Lord unto me, saying, Son of man, hath not the house of Israel, the rebellious house, said unto thee, what doest thou? And he's asking him, hasn't Israel come and asked, what are you doing? In verse 10, say thou unto them, thus says the Lord God, this burden concerneth the prince in Jerusalem, and all the house of Israel that are among them. Say, I am your sign, like as I have done, so shall it be done unto them. They shall remove and go into captivity. So this was a prophecy by God to the Israelites, and he was telling them that they will be taken captive. And in being taken captive, there are different things. There is luggage for captivity. There is the time, which is the evening time in which they're moving. There is the wall, and this wall, they make a hole in it. And also, there is covering the eyes such that Ezekiel is not able to see. The things that we need to examine to understand what it would be meaning. What does the wall mean? Go with me to Nehemiah chapter 1, and we shall be reading verse 3. In the time of Nehemiah, this was a time of which the building or the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem was the main work. And mind you, when you look back, there are decrees that were given, and essentially they get to be 3 decrees to go and rebuild Jerusalem, But time reached, and there was a need of another minor or something like another decree, which was like the 4th decree, and this was King Artaxerxes, to whom Nehemiah went and made a request to go and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Now those decrees, when you go to the 3 angels' messages, the beginning of the line of the 2,300 days begins by 3 decrees. But also the end of that line, there are 3 angels. So in one way, those decrees can as well symbolize the 3 angels' messages. And when you look at Nehemiah, which was like a 4th decree, it will give you some mind like this work of Nehemiah could have something connected with the work of the angel of Revelation 18, which angel sometimes we call the 4th angel. He comes and joins the 3rd angel and empowers that angel or repeats those messages. So it's a special message that is in the book of Nehemiah, and I would encourage you as well to go and study it and understand the spiritual applications that are there. Much of it has to do with today, and that's why we are trying to look here. So in verse 3 it says that, and they said unto me, the remnant that are left of the captivity. Now I think you can see captivity is now mentioned, and in the time of Ezekiel it was an issue of captivity. And they said unto me, the remnant that are left of the captivity, they are in the province, are in great affliction and reproach. Now, listen to what is involved. The wall of Jerusalem also is broken down. When is the wall broken down? When there is captivity. And the gates thereof are burned with fire. So in this case, the wall is the one broken down, and what we can see there connected is the issue of captivity. So what is this captivity? We understand that this captivity being talked about, it is when Nebuchadnezzar came and took captive the children of Israel, and that was Babylon. We understand that Rome, or the papacy, is a symbol of Babylon today. And when you look at this Babylon, there's a captivity that is coming in our time, and that is the National Sunday Law time. And this message to Israelites, or to SDAs, you and me, is that that night, when it comes, the night of captivity comes. If we do not follow God's will or do as the Lord says, and we become rebellious, we shall be taken captive, just as Ezekiel showed. And the lesson here is that if it is captivity and the walls are being broken, what could the wall be symbolizing in our time? Which was the reason for the captivity. Now, just go with me to chapter 13 of the same book, and we might be helped to understand. Nehemiah chapter 13, we're going to be reading verse 21. These are the spiritual applications of this prophecy. Verse 21 says, "Then I testified against them." But before that, let's just go to verse 15. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 15. Let's get the story, what was happening here. Okay, maybe it's fine. Let's first read verse 21. Verse 21 says, "Then I testified against them and said unto them, Why lodge ye about the wall?" You see, the wall is mentioned again. "If ye do so again, I will lay my hands on you. From that time forth, they came they no more on the Sabbath." Now, what you should identify here is that the wall is being talked about, and the Sabbath is being talked about. So there is a relationship between the wall and the Sabbath. Now, go to verse 15. It says, "In those days saw I in Judah some trading winepress on the Sabbath." So some in Judah. This is Judah, this is not Babylon. But these were Seventh-day Adventists who were working on the Sabbath day. "Some trading on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves and lading asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals." Verse 16. "There dwelt men of Tyre." What is Tyre? Tyre has a big relationship with Babylon, if you go and make research. "Also therein, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem." So these were no other people, but they were the people of the Sabbath. They were Seventh-day Adventists. And verse 17 says, "Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said unto them, What evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day?" He's asking them, what evil thing is this you're doing, and break the Sabbath day? Verse 18, Did not your fathers thus? In other words, didn't your fathers do like that? "And did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath." To me, what I'm seeing here is like saying the fathers broke the Sabbath. They didn't keep the Sabbath as it was supposed to be kept. Not only the Sabbath merely, but the commandments of God. Because when you go to Deuteronomy, he tells them that curses and blessings he brings to them. If they do his commandments, he'll bless them. If they break the commandments, he will curse them. And in this case, the curse came to them. But in the 10 Commandments, this Sabbath comes to hold out a big, becomes weighty. It is a weighty consideration in this case. So he's saying, did not your fathers do like that? And then God brought a captivity. What is this trying to say? Isn't it trying to mean that Ezekiel making a hole through the wall? This wall represents the 10 Commandments of God. And Ezekiel is being used to be as a sign to the people of God that when the children of Israel break the wall or make a hole through the wall, they break the Sabbath, which is a portion of the 10 commandments. And in breaking that Sabbath, by profaning it, that will be in the evening or in the night. That is when the Sunday law will be in place. What will happen next? They will be taken captive, just as the fathers were taken captive. Verse 19. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, like when these gates of Jerusalem began to be dark, in other words, when the Sabbath was just beginning, I commanded that the gates should be shut. So Nehemiah is trying to show the beginning of the Sabbath, right from when the evening is beginning to, like the sun is beginning to drop down. It is beginning to get a little dim. He says the gates should be shut. And charged that they should not be opened till after the what? The Sabbath. And some of my servants set I at the gates, that there should no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. Verse 20. So the merchants and sellers of all kind of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice. So, but still, you see that these people were around the wall outside, trying to entice the children of Israel to break the Sabbath. So the wall that is in Ezekiel, it is the 10 commandments. But primarily in these 10 commandments, it is the Sabbath. And when we break the Sabbath, and that is in the time of the evening, when the National Sunday Law comes in, and that breaking of the Sabbath or receiving the image of the beast or the mark of the beast, as we're going to see, or as we have been seeing, it does not come suddenly. It is a thing that we have been practicing in life that produces what really happens at the National Sunday Law. I hope we get that point clearly. So this was the message that God was giving to his people. And when we go to Revelation chapter 13, again, that is the prophecy that touches our lives right now. This is a prophecy that is just being fulfilled right before our eyes. Revelation 13, verse 11. We have read this, and let us remind ourselves. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the what? The first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. This is USA, letting people to worship the papacy. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And in connection to this fire, verse 14 explains what that is. And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles. So meaning the bringing of fire down, this is one of the miracles. So what power is this? This is a religious power. This is the horn, that is the Protestant one. Which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And it goes on trying to show USA letting the world, or enticing the world in different ways to make an image to the beast. We see that in this case, when it comes to the 10 commandments in the schools, as we're going to see, that it's one concrete way how the United States of America is enticing or bringing the world to form an image to the beast. So now, when we go to inspiration, we are told by inspiration by Ellen White. I'd like us to have a look at this. We're reading this from Review and Herald. You can see the page. She says, Evangelists should be finding their way into all the places where the minds of men are agitated over the question of Sunday legislation and of the teaching of religion in public schools. Two things. The minds of people are being agitated on the issue of Sunday being legislated as a law. And the second thing is religion being required to be taught in public schools. It is the neglect of Seventh-day Adventists to improve these providential opportunities to present the truth that burdens my heart and keeps me awake night after night. Why am I reading this? It's because what we are going to just see happening now, it is not new. It has happened before. And interesting enough, the first time it happened, or recently when it happened, is the time when the issue of the Sunday law was a hot topic. It was actually going to be passed in the world. And we shall be seeing that further on as we look into the writings of A.T. Jones. But for now, I'd like us to look at this, what is happening. In USA, there is a move for the want of the 10 Commandments to be put in schools. Excuse me. Yeah, so there is a move in USA for the want of the 10 Commandments to be put in schools. This issue of the 10 Commandments being put in schools, or maybe reading the Bible in schools, it sounds or looks like something that is innocent. Well, what is bad with children, pupils being taught the Bible? All along, that's what we want. But there's a caution to it, why it is not right when it comes to public schools. Public schools, as it is mentioned, maybe they are like government schools or schools that are basically not Christian, that are not privately Christian. Now, we know today that even the so-called Christian schools, it is the same thing now. Everything is the same, the curriculums, etc. So, we may still call them as well public schools. So there is a move in different states. One of them is Louisiana, another one is Texas, another one is Dakota. I think you have been looking at this, some of you. And this gets serious because it goes beyond what we are seeing on surface. When you see the quotation Ellen White gave us, she talked of the Sunday law, and then she talked of religion in public schools. When you go to history, as we shall see, these things were moving at the same time. And interesting enough, that is what is happening even right now. So I'd like you to listen to some of these clips. What is happening.
Louisiana will now require the 10 Commandments to be displayed in every public school classroom, the only state in the country to do so. The state's Republican Governor Jeff Landry signed the bill into law yesterday.
This bill mandates the display of the 10 Commandments in every classroom in public, elementary, secondary, and post-education schools in the state of Louisiana. Because if you want to respect the rule of law, you got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses.
That's right. Amen.
Under the law, the posters must be no smaller than 11 by 14 inches, and the commandments must be the central focus of the poster, and in a large, easily readable font. They would be paid for through private donations, not state funds. It comes as similar bills have been proposed in Texas, Oklahoma, and Utah. All of this raising questions about the constitutional separation of church and state, with civil liberty groups pledging to sue. We're joined now by Charles Haynes, Senior Fellow for Religious Liberty.
Yeah, I think we have heard that. In Louisiana, they were trying to mandate the 10 Commandments in schools, and Many, as you have seen, they're clapping for it. And he mentioned that if you want to respect of the one who is the giver of the law, you need to start at the first step, that is to keep the commandments. And now, we should ask ourselves now, the question comes is that if they are trying to now implement these 10 commandments in schools, the question is, which type of 10 commandments are they going to put there? But because we know, for example, there are the Roman Catholic Church commandments, we know the catechism, the commandments are not as they are in the Bible. So which of the two? Exactly the ones, the arrangement that is in the Bible, or the ones that are meant for the Catholics? So there are different questions that come after that. And the same thing happened in the years 1886, 87, 88, when they were having such a bill in place. And back then, it was the Sabbath, it was the Bible that was being debated. Should the Bible be used in schools as a mandate? Now, we shall have the mist clarified to understand well these matters, especially when we read what Eddie Jones says about this. Now, when you look at this issue, Donald Trump is in support of it. And not only that, the Project 2025, which we have been looking at before, it has a portion of education. And it says that the Department of Education is to be eliminated or to be abolished. And in fact, Trump himself said it openly that they are going to abolish the Department of Education. So after abolishing it, what will be put in place? They will put in place what they want. And majorly, such things as the 10 Commandments being put in schools is what they are going to bring. And particularly, the 10 Commandments being in schools, a school that is state-based, bringing in commandments or bringing in church issues, it's the joining of church and state. And what do we call that? That is the image of the beast. But we shall have it well explained down the road. Now, we can have a look at this again.
Yeah, they want to arrest you. Who likes the 10 Commandments, by the way, going up in the schools? They think it's such a bad thing. I said, has anyone read the thou shalt not steal, has anybody read this incredible stuff? It's just incredible. They don't want it to go up. It's crazy world, a crazy world. Things. Who would think that somebody would want open borders where people flood in by the millions from all over the world, from prisons and from mental institutions, and a lot of terrorists in record numbers. Nobody's seen anything like it. Who would think that's good? Who would think that, like a little thing, it's so embarrassing even have to say it, but I say it because it's a big political deal. Who would think that men playing in women's sports is okay? Who would think that? I have.
Yeah, so you can hear his arguments. And he's trying to say, who's against the 10 Commandments? Like, what is bad with that? And he tries to mention some of them. And the question comes to the mind, why should the president have an interest in such matters? It should be a preacher that is preaching such things. Interesting enough, at the same place where Trump made this statement, also Ben Carson did the same. Dr. Ben Carson, I believe you know him. This is a famous Seventh-day Adventist, and he was saying the same. He was trying to say there is a need of these commandments in schools.
58, a man by the name of Edward Louis Shrimp enacted a lawsuit against the Abingdon County Public Schools because they required a Bible reading at the beginning of school and recitation of the Lord's Prayer. The state tried to accommodate them, and they said, you can exempt your child from that if you want with a written note. That wasn't good enough, and it continued all the way up to the Supreme Court in 1963, when the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional and that you could not have required Bible readings or recitation of prayers in a public school setting. Since that time, it has morphed into something even worse, so that you can't have God or religion in a public school setting or in a public square. That's what people have come to believe. That is not what our founders intended. That is not what the Constitution says. And really, just think about this logically for a moment. In a country where your founding document, the Declaration of Independence, says your rights come from your Creator, also known as God, in a country whose Pledge of Allegiance says we are one nation under God, in a country where every coin in your pocket and every bill in your wallet says, "In God we trust," somehow you're not supposed to talk about God. Does that make any sense? That's schizophrenia. And doesn't that explain a lot of what's going on? And aren't you glad that yesterday the governor of Louisiana signed into law, put the Ten Commandments back in the schools? You know, because after that Supreme Court decision, they started pulling down the Ten Commandments. But you know what? Next time you see somebody who wants that done, ask them this question. What exactly is wrong with thou shalt not kill, and thou shalt not steal, and thou shalt not envy, and thou shalt not commit adultery, and thou shalt not bear false witness, and honor your parents? What's wrong with those things? They never really have an answer for that, do they? And we have to continue to press.
We can hear him. He's saying that next time you get someone who is against the commandments being in school, ask them what's wrong with those different laws that he mentioned. But as a Seventh-day Adventist, he forgets that there is a law which says, remember the Sabbath day to do what? To keep it holy. And what will be done? Because if you are going to enforce and make it a law that these commandments should be in school or must be in school, it means you're not just going to put them there and they be like a picture. It means you're going to now study these commandments in detail, understand what they mean, and keep every single one of them. So when it comes to the commandments which tells us, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, what will be agitated in these schools concerning that commandment? Of course, it will be a Sunday Sabbath. And Ben Carson is not putting that into consideration. And for us who see this, we should be enlightened that if such a thing as commandments are being made a mandate to be in schools, then we should lift up our heads and understand that our redemption draweth nigh, because it shows that the Sunday law, when it comes to that fourth commandment, is going to be enforced. I'd like you to listen to a few more here, like 2 more clips, and then we can go through the PowerPoint.
With civil liberty groups,
They want to arrest you.
This is Arnie Duncan, the Secretary of Education for 7 years during the Obama administration. And this is Oklahoma State Schools Superintendent Ryan Walters, who supports President-elect Donald Trump's plan to abolish the Department of Education.
I'm going to close the Department of Education and move education back to the states. And we're going to do it fast.
President-elect Trump will not eliminate the Department of Education. And this will be just another unfulfilled campaign promise, like getting Mexico to build a wall.
Look, President Trump has laid out the most aggressive, boldest, most conservative reform agenda for education in this nation's history.
This weaponization of the Federal Department of Education will just be disastrous.
So why do Trump and some Republicans want to dismantle the Department of Education? And what would that look like?
I think all those federal employees are going to be fired from their jobs. We're going to do away with the agency. That building needs to go away. It needs to be something else.
The U.S. Department of Education, the smallest of the cabinet-level agencies, has more than 4,400 employees and a budget of $79 billion.
Education is mostly a state and local issue, but what the Department of Education does is pretty important.
The department handles Title I funding for high-poverty K-12 schools and IDEA funding for students with disabilities. At the higher ed level, it distributes federal student aid, including loans and Pell Grants. The Office for Civil Rights enforces laws like Title IX, protecting against gender-based discrimination.
It's fighting for equity, a focus on excellence, and really driving and scaling innovation. Those are three roles I think are critically important.
Duncan is now the leader of Chicago Cred, a nonprofit working to reduce gun violence.
Let's take IDA very specifically, children with special needs. As you know, historically, those children were actually denied access to going to public schools. And it took the federal government to come in and provide access to children with special needs. There are over 7.5 million children with special needs that receive billions of dollars of additional funding from the U.S. Department of Education. And guess what? You want accountability for those resources.
Superintendent Walters says school accountability should shift from the federal government to parents.
There's nobody who loves their child more or who cares more about their child than their mom and dad. So the more that we empower them through school choice, through transparency and accountability measures, what you're going to see is all schools are going to get better.
Trump faces an uphill battle to abolish the Department of Education. It would take an act of Congress to dismantle the department or to get rid of any of the programs written into federal law.
I sometimes think of this as two different scenarios. A soft abolish would be getting rid of the department, but keeping its various programs, and then just sort of redistributing the programs to other federal agencies. A hard abolish would be getting rid.
Okay, so for that last statement is that while it's going to dismantle it, they're going to put these duties of education back into other hands. It is trying to say that while after he has abolished, after they have removed this, they're going to put it into other hands. Which hands, for example? Of course, the hands that have been at the center of the Project 2025, the hands that want the 10 Commandments to be made a mandate in schools. And I believe you have been seeing things concerning North Dakota and in South Dakota. They're saying that they are revisiting or reconsidering the bringing of the blue laws, but in this same state they have just brought in legalizing again the 10 Commandments in schools. So the thing is moving at a quick rate. Things are happening quickly in the same state now. After the issue of the 10 Commandments was introduced, 10 Commandments in schools, now the Sunday Law Bill was now in discussion. What does this speak to us, brothers and sisters? It means that the Sunday Law is just at the door. I'd like you to listen now to this last video.
Red, Kentucky, and Nebraska vote.
There is an ascendant religious group that I've been following. They believe that the United States is a Christian nation and that the Constitution is rooted in the Bible. And this group believes that Christians are called to take over the government and that Trump has been anointed by God to help them do that.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
This minority of Christians has an outsized influence. They have proximity to power. They are going to be trying to accomplish a whole lot under the new Trump administration.
We're going to protect Christianity, and I can say that. I don't have to be politically correct.
Here are 5 things that they definitely have in their to-do list. The Establishment Clause is part of the First Amendment, which is, of course, the amendment that gives us free speech and also freedom of religion. And the Establishment Clause basically codifies the separation of church and state. It's important to Christian nationalists because they believe that America is rightfully a Christian nation. They believe that Christians should have control of the United States, and if we have an Establishment Clause saying that government is separate from religion, it will be hard for them to do that.
Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022, At least 20 states have banned or restricted access to abortion.
Advocating against abortion and advocating against birth control is unpopular. So if they can rebrand this as harnessing the power of your natural cycle to prevent or achieve pregnancy, then they are really expecting that a lot of people are going to want to get on board. During the first Trump administration, there was federal funding that was dedicated to natural family planning. And then more recently, earlier this year, when IVF came under attack, there was a group of Republican senators that put together a bill that had to do with what they called restorative reproductive medicine, which was basically a fancy way of saying tracking your cycles to try to get pregnant. Now that Republicans have more power in the government, it is almost certain that they will advance more legislation.
Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry signed into law a bill requiring the Ten Commandments be easily readable on a poster-sized display in every publicly funded classroom in the state.
Trump has said several times that he plans to dismantle the Federal Department of Education.
We should abolish the Department of Education.
Whether or not he does that, you can expect that Christian nationalists will be lobbying for more money that is supposed to go to public schools to be diverted to religious private schools. They often do this through voucher programs.
All right, so primarily, I think you can see what really is happening here. It is the Ten Commandments in schools. It is about U.S. again being Christian nation, etc. Church things are now so much heard in the mouth of statesmen, or people who are to be in the civics or the civil matters. Now, you may not be understanding entirely what big deal is it with this issue of public schools. There are two schools. If there is church and state, the public schools are state schools. On the other hand, there's church or Christianity. That would mean that there should be Christian schools or Christian education. Now, when you get things of the state schools, which things are pertaining to interpretation according to the world and things of this world, and merge them into the school that is Christian, you get a problem. That is something that I like Etty Jones to explain to us much better. However, before that, let us look at what was happening in 1887. In those years, what was happening there was the issue of religion again in public schools. This issue was happening in those years, and Brother McCoach, you want to say? You are trying to, you're unmuted. Okay, sorry about that. Let's continue. So, in this issue of religion in schools, came in that old time in 1887, primarily 1888, and what came in next was the National Sunday Law. So what happened then is what is just happening right now. It just shows us that the Sunday Law is what is just going to happen in a few months from now. So now let's read this. It says that Monday evening, January 13th, at the annual meeting of the Presbyterian Union of New York City, annual meeting of the Presbyterian Union of New York City, there was a discussion upon the question, to what extent, if any, should religion be taught in the public schools? Dr. Josiah Strong, Secretary of the Evangelical Alliance, and Dr. David G. Willey argued in favor of religion in schools. Drs. D.H. Greer and Howard Crosby argued against it. It was an interesting discussion. Dr. Strong he began by criticizing the Roman Catholic. So now, this was the National Sunday Law. The issue of religion in public schools in the year 1887. And it continues to say, he said that position is to be regretted but not to be wondered at. The object of public school is to make good citizens. Let us listen closely these PowerPoints we are reading here. It says, The object of parochial school is to make good Catholics. You see? The removal thereof of the Bible from the public schools as a concession to Catholics would be a needless sacrifice, because the primary object of Roman Catholic teaching is the Roman Catholic religion, and any school in which that is not taught is not acceptable to the Catholic Church. In answer to the Roman Catholic call for the division of the school fund, he said it would probably destroy the public school and would certainly violate the principle of the entire separation of church and state. He argued that the public schools are not Protestant because distinctive Protestant doctrines are not taught. You see that? So now it's an issue of what religion now, because they were saying we need Bibles in schools. And what came next is, which kind of Bible should we have? That was a question that Eddie Jones had to pose. What Bibles then? If we need Bibles in school, but which Bibles? If religion is needed in schools, which kind of religion? Because now we have many religions, you see. Now, it goes on in another book. This is the American Sentinel, I think. Nor is this all. We view with grave apprehensions the encroachments of the papal power. Now listen, this is what the papal power wants, the encroachments on its own part upon the civil institutions of this government. Everybody knows that the papacy has never worried of condemning our public schools because they are not made the medium of religious instruction. So what the papacy does is that they were condemning the public schools of America that they are not teaching religion. And what was this meaning? Papacy wanted religion to be put in schools. So the National Reform Association, that was a group, or it was an organization in America which was called National Reform Association. They were trying to reform, that's what they're trying to say. And today, it is what is happening with people like President Donald Trump, etc., with the team. They want to reform America to bring back Christianity. The National Reform Association and its allies now echo the papal condemnation and seek to remove the cause of it by pending amendment to the national constitution, in which the national power is pledged to see that every state shall establish and maintain a system of religious public schools. Now, to secure this and the cooperation of the papacy, at the same time, the National Reform Association agrees that the Catholic Bible and the Catholic instruction shall be established in public schools wherever Roman Catholics are in the majority. And also in securing and enforcing the pending national Sunday law. You hear that? So as we are reading this, please let us understand it clearly that the issue of religion in schools, it is closely connected with the national Sunday law. Once you see it, that means the Sunday law is just the one coming. And that's what is happening now. And it says that, and also in securing and enforcing the pending national Sunday law, the national reformers pledge themselves to gladly join hands with the Roman Catholics and to make repeated advances to secure the cooperation of the Roman Catholics in any form in which they may be willing to exhibit it. Therefore, the 2 points, the national Sunday law, 1, and religion in the public schools. Do you see? Eddie Jones is trying to show us that they're moving together. Upon which the Women's Christian Temperance Union is diligently working to secure national religious legislation. Are the very points upon which the National Reform Association stands pledged to unite with the papacy. And which year is that? Down there, the reference, that is 1888. That's when the National Sunday Law was going to be passed. And it is through this brother, Eddie Jones, that God worked in the Congress of America. And it defeated this Sunday Law being passed. Now, how important is it then concerning schools in connection to the image of the beast? And this is what Ellen White says, and Eddie Jones will try to expound the matter ahead. It says, the early reformers found it necessary to have their own courses of study, textbooks, teachers, methods, principles, etc. They separated themselves completely from the popular schools of the day. It required courage and faith in those days to take such a stand. So there was a need of courage to take such a stand back then, and to require even more courage and faith for those who are preparing for translation to take the stand which the testimonies are pleading for them to take. Now listen, in connection to the issue of education, it says that they knew that if their children should go to the schools where the popular education was given, they would receive the mark of the papacy or the beast. You get the point? They understood that, and Eddie Jones is going to explain how that happens. Those who are living up to the light at the present time will see even more clearly that if their children continue to go to the popular schools, they will receive such principles as will compel them to assist in giving life to the image of the word, in giving life to the image of the beast. And this is what inspiration says. We're reading from pamphlets 81. The command found in Revelation 18 verse 4, come out of her, my people, means to come out of those institutions which will place the minds of our young people principles which are apt to make them join the class of worshippers, of which we read in 2 Timothy 3:5. They having a form of godliness by denying the power thereof. So, he's trying to show the combining of church and state. When you combine these two things, or when you look back, we have been explaining this, that it was this tree of knowledge of good and evil that was actually a combination of good and evil, and that is not God's will. So when you look at the church, this is the righteousness of God, or the holiness. And when you bring the state, or the things concerning the world, and join them together, you are forming the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And that means to be eating of that fruit. And what happens is we lose the image of God. And after losing the image of God, we get the image of the beast. And that beast was that serpent called Satan, through which actually Satan himself worked. So that is how it happens with this issue of education as well. So it's saying that as faithful watchmen, we should be just as desirous of getting our children out of the popular schools as we are to call the older people out of the popular churches. You see, the way we call the people out of the false churches, it also should be the way how we are to live the wrong education type. The popular churches are only a product of worldly education. So to get at the root of the matter, we must separate ourselves from that which creates the condition in which all religious world at present finds itself. So the present world finds itself in a position based on what it has gained in what? In the popular education, or in the education of the world. So altogether, what does this mean? And I would like A.T. Jones to explain to us this matter as we are now closing. This is from the Place of the Bible in Education, page 53. Now listen to this carefully so that you can understand. He is explaining how the education of the world is the perfect and the main medium through which church and state has been joined, and the formation of the image of the beast. We have sucked on the same things, all of us. And if we are not converted in such things we have been taught, the pride we have imbibed, and all these things, if we have not repented of them, we are actually going to fulfill the formation of the image of the beast. That is what it means. And no wonder there are others who still hesitate, even while they are in those institutions or those schools. It's a sad thing to say. At such a time as when things are going to close, even there's such hesitation to understand and step out and do what is God's will. I don't know if it's right to say, but it's almost too late for people who are still in the valley of decision in such matters. And it's not all about leaving some institution. You can live and still perish. It's about living and now replacing or doing that which is supposed to be done. Listen to what Erigen says in his explanation. He says, the Greek theory of education adopted by the apostate church led to the union of church and state, period. When the church adopted the Greek method of education, it formed its joint church and state. That's what happened. And the total ruin of the state. And that is the reason why even America is now joining church and state. Why? It has been feeding on the purple or Greek version of education. And is it a surprise that they are now going to create an image of the beast? Is it a surprise that they are now calling for the religion in these schools, etc.? Because to them, that is what education is. But Jones is going to continue expounding. The result is the ruin of the whole state. The principle of Christianity is the total separation of religion and state. Christianity recognizes the right of the state to exist apart from the church. So as Christians, we recognize the right of state to be there, the right of the government to be there, and to be separate from things of the church. And that requires that the church must exist apart from the state. The church and the state occupy two distinctly different realms. Listen, two different realms. The realm of the church is the realm of morals. The realm of the state is the realm of civics. The realm of the church is the inner life of man and the world to come. The realm of the state is the outward life of a man and the world that is. So the state is about my life on the outward and about the life today, the world. Doesn't go beyond. It doesn't have anything to do with heaven or things that have come thereafter. Now listen, the state, rightly constituted and abiding within its own realm, never can interfere with the affairs of the church. And as a matter of fact, no state ever has interfered with the affairs of the church, except when it went outside of its proper realm and assumed to itself the garb of religion. You hear that? No state has ever interfered with the church, except when the state starts to get out of its position, its rightful position, and starts to assume the garb or the dress of religion. And what do you see with Donald Trump and these other people? They talk about Christ, Christian nationalism, etc. This is state now starting to get the garb of religion. And what happens is that they are getting out of their realm. The church, abiding in its own realm, can never interfere in any way with the interests of the state. And as a matter of fact, the church has never done so, except where she left her own realm, ascended the throne of civil power, and presumed to wield the sword of the state. The church as well cannot interfere with the state, except if it goes out of its position and starts to get the sword of the state. The state, within its own realm and for itself, you listen, the state, in its realm and for itself, has a right to establish a system of education, which in the nature of things must be only of this world. The point, period. The state has that right to make its own educational system, and according to natural things, it's things to do with this world. The church in her own realm must maintain Christian education. So also the church has to do its own education, its own education. That is very important. Let the state have its own. Let the church have its own. The problem is when the intermingling is brought here. So friends, what does this tell us? It tells us that don't look at Donald Trump and these other like Robert Jeffress, D.G. Vance, and these other many people. Don't look at them and say that these men are bringing about this the joint. No. The point is that it is grounded and founded in the issue of education. That is the point. If we just get that, it's nothing that has happened now. This is something that has been cooking ever since America got its independence. You see? And when the papal education came in and took over these so-called Protestant schools. And what they are being taught in there, the products are the Trumps, the Robert Jeffress, the Vance, DJ Vance, etc. And they are now just acting out what has been in the process. So we are at the peak of the point, the peak of the matter. So meaning, the thing that you and me have been doing in school is the core thing, the main thing that makes the image of the beast. That's the point. You see? When I read these things, they just, they struck my mind. But this is the reality. So the church in her own realm must maintain Christian education. And the state, in establishing and conducting such system of education as may seem to it best, the state, the way it will do its education, as it is best to it, cannot ask that the church shall abandon Christianity. That is wrong. Because the church has a right and the state has a right. The church in her own realm, in maintaining Christian education, cannot, listen to that, so the church, let me say what Ben Carson is saying, this is a quote to him, that the church now, which is maintaining Christian education, cannot ask that the state education shall abandon such system of education as it may have adopted. So we don't have the right, we don't have to tell the state, schools or public schools, you people, you need the 10 commandments in your schools. That is wrong. You see? And must not antagonize the state in its chosen system of education any more than in any other affair or act of the state within its own realm. So now, can you understand what it means? That they have a form of godliness but denying the power thereof? It's because of mingling good and bad, mingling these things. US has, and the whole world altogether, they have fallen short of this. And even today, many of us Adventists, we are still failing to understand this point, but the truth is, it is what really makes the image of the beast. Anyone who is going to fulfill this prophecy, to have the image of the beast, it's not because it has just happened, but it is creating itself, has been creating itself since we were born in our lives. We are just going to now show what has been developed in our hearts. An education which makes God a by the way, that does not like to retain God in its knowledge. And inspiration says about the antediluvians, that's what they did. That's what the Bible says. They didn't retain God in their knowledge. And what happened is that they apostatized from God. That's why we have a difficulty in taking time with God. It's not attractive to us because we have not cultivated the habit of it. Right from our education system, we have been taught to love self, to love to fulfill our desires and, put our minds on the buildings, the architecture, and the businesses, etc. without the grounds of God. And we try now to mingle in things of God, etc. And that produces a people who have a form of godliness by denying the power thereof. You see? So when we're seeing this mandate now, it has not been there official, but now they are saying they are going to abolish this system, that the education system in US, which somehow, or which has been recognizing the issue of church being separate from state. And now they are going to bring in commandments being in schools. And guess what? The devil knows that majority of people or everyone has something to do with education, right from kindergarten, primary, high school, etc., university. They know that. Satan knows that. And he knows that when he brings in the issue of the commandments in schools, he wants to drive them to the fourth commandment. And when he drives them to the fourth commandment, he will tell them, you see, this is important. And says that this day will default to Sunday as a Sabbath. So it's alarming to us. It's telling us that the National Sunday Law is just before us a few months from now. A few months. And which image are we developing? The image, the lovely image of Christ, or the image of Satan? You see? As we conclude. Eddie Jones explains, in the course of its existence, the United States has developed and established a system of education. The principle upon which this system of education is founded is acknowledged to be, in this respect, the principle upon which the nation was founded, the separation of religion and the state. Therefore, religion must not be taught in the state schools. This principle, though infringed in instances, has been generally adhered to on the part of the state. But the church has not adhered to this principle. So the church is the one that is making, that is becoming unserious and committed to its point. And what is its point? Worship God in truth and spirit. But the church, now listen attentively here, but the church has not adhered to this principle. Indeed, she has hardly recognized it at all. She has generally acquiesced in the states adhering to the principle and refusing to incorporate religion or the religious method in its system of education. But she has not at all adhered to the principle that the church must not adopt the secular method in education. But this story is so well told by the United States government itself that we need go no further in defining it. So now, these are words from the horse's mouth. Listen. In the annual report of the United States Commissioner of Education for the school year 1896, the United States government has made perfectly clear the distinction between the secular method and the religious method in education. A distinction strictly in accordance with the principles of Christianity and with the fundamental principles upon which the government of the United States was founded. First, as the secular school. Now, let's read about the secular school. How should it be? What do they say? This is from the horse's mouth. The secular school gives positive instruction. It teaches mathematics, natural science, history, and language. Knowledge of the facts can be precise and accurate, and a similar knowledge of the principles can be arrived at. Now listen attentively. He says that the self-activity of the pupil is before all things demanded by the teacher of the secular school. That is one problem. The student is expected to do according to his will. You see? You do according to your will. Self-activity is demanded. Go and do stuff. Okay, we shall understand why is that serious, important. The pupil must not take things on authority. When you tell a student, the student, according to public schools or secular education, they are not to take your word on authority. They have a right to say, I will not take that, or I will take it based on this and this. But by his own activity, must test and verify what he has been told. So, this secular standard says, when I tell you, don't take it. You have the freedom to say, I will take it or I will not. And what you're going to do is, go and make sure you test it and test it and test it until you have proven it. then you can believe. But if it is not proven, then you can't believe. Do you know what that means? It means if I cannot prove where God came from, I have a right to not believe him. I cannot depend on that authority. That is the secular standard. Let's continue. But by his own activity must test and verify what he has been told. He must trace out the mathematical demonstrations and see their necessity. He must learn the method of investigating facts in the special provinces of science and history. The spirit of the secular school, therefore, comes to be an enlightening one. It is kind of enlightening, just as Eve felt like she's now somehow enlightened when she ate that forbidden fruit. So it seems to be enlightening, although not of the highest order. But its enlightenment tends to make trust in authority more and more difficult for the young mind. That's the reason why you talk to your children and they don't want to listen to you. They have been taught to not obey, you see. Next, as to religious education. I don't know, our time is fast spent. I think we're going to end maybe on this slide. It says, what does it define in the religious education? What is it? Religious education, it is obvious, in giving the highest results of thought and life to the young, must cling to the form of authority. Which authority is that? God, the Creator. And not attempt to borrow the methods of mathematics, science, and history from the secular school. Such borrowing will result only in giving the young people an overweening confidence in the finality of their own immature judgments. They will become conceited and shallow-minded. It is well that the child should trust his own intellect in dealing with the multiplication table and the rule of 3. It is well that he should learn the rules and all the exceptions in Latin syntax and verify them in the classic authors, but he must not be permitted to summon before him the dogmas of religion and form part conclusions regarding their rationality. So when it comes to that which is religious, as we have defined it, that was a Education Commission in USA. It shows that of the secular is supposed to be secular, and that is for Christian should be Christian. And Wagner, in that book, The Place of the Bible in Education, page 58, he says, all this is an excellent reason as to why and how religion cannot be taught in public schools, why religious education cannot be adopted by the state. And it gives just as excellent reason why the church in her education, that is, religious education, cannot even borrow, much less adopt the methods of secular school. And someone will ask, what are those methods, please? Like, what are those methods that were used in a Christian school? And that will tell us to go and study the Bible diligently. And you'll understand that God led his people, and he put in them the wisdom, the spirit of wisdom, in different things. And God taught them through Moses, etc. Our methods are particularly and uniquely supposed to be those according to what God gave Israel. So friends, it goes deeper. All this shows us that as back then, religion in public schools was an issue, and what came next is the national Sunday law. Today, it has begun echoing, and the result is a national Sunday law. Are we prepared? You see? May God help us. So, we shall end there. Let's have a prayer. Precious Father, thank you for those words and answering our prayer to give us ability to study. I pray that, Lord, you may continue to sustain us help our hearts, Lord, to not be settled until we are established in righteousness. Do not let us, Lord, to receive the mark of the beast. Let not our souls be a way to form the image of the beast, but let the image of Christ be formed in us. Abide with us in the Sabbath day. In Jesus' name.